Welcome to SSDD Studio. My name is Ebba Tam.
And my name is Andreas Krzyzewski-Hansson.
And we are the host of SSDD Studio. Today marks the premiere of Southern Sweden Design Days 2022. This design festival opens the door to the Southern design scene of Sweden and welcomes both local residents and visitors from all around the world.
This event, organized by Form Design Center, is a new annual design festival that highlights and builds knowledge about design, focusing on sustainability, collaboration, development, and innovation.
You are watching SSDD Studio, live here from Lokstallarna in Malmö. This building used to be a railway workshop, but you can't find trains here anymore. Now the area is home to beekeepers, restaurants, coffee roasters, stage builders, designers, and a circus hotel.
During the design festival, you can experience both physical and digital activities. SSDD Studio is a 3-day program where you will find seminars and talks on all things design. You can join us here live at Lokstallarna or check out the video later as they are recorded.
For more information, please visit our website, southernswedenDesignDays.com. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Southern Sweden Design Days. Welcome to SSDD Studio. We will jump directly to the first conversation of the day. The first talk asks the question, what is the role of design in shaping a more fair and sustainable future?
In this conversation, we hope to learn how we collectively can organize to create change from individuals to society at large. To talk about this matter, Malmö University has invited a group of smart people that think about and work with these topics every day, one way or another.
We welcome to the talk Conversation on Design, Social Innovation and Sustainability. Pia Makalin, Per-Anders Hillgren, Sara Bjärstorp, Ezio Mazzini, and the moderator Lotta Orban. Welcome.
Hello, and warmly welcome to the conversation on design, social innovation and sustainability. This conversation is arranged by Forum for Social Innovation, Sweden, at Malmö University. We're a national knowledge hub and a collaboration platform on social innovation. My name is Lotta Orban, and I'm a journalist and communicator at the Forum at the university, and I will guide you through this conversation. Now, our first guest is Ezio Mazzini, who is a nestor in the field of design for sustainability. Most recently, his interests have focused on social innovation, considered as a major driver of sustainable changes. In this perspective, he started DESIS, an international network of schools of design active in the field of design for social innovation and sustainability. Presently, he is president of DESIS Network, a network of schools of design active in the field of design for social innovation and sustainability. Presently, he is president of DESIS Network and honorary professor at Politecnico di Milano. Ezio's latest book is called Livable Proximity. The floor is yours, Ezio.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me here, Lotta. I'm sorry not to be in Malmö. That is a place that I like a lot. But in any case, digital is better than nothing. And so my little story. I've discussed with Lotta to introduce this book that is about proximity. And I want to explain why, in my view, it's a very important concept. And at least for what I got myself, it's a point at which I arrived after a long journey of discussing and thinking and making projects on sustainability. So if you want, the previous step was after many decades of discussing and experimenting on what does it mean to move towards sustainability, many people arrived to the idea that the notion of care was the fundamental one. So we could not imagine a sustainable society if it is not a society where people are capable to care, and care means a very special relationships in between people, and between people and everything that is around us. Let's say between people and the overall network of life in which we are. So, but afterward, discussing how it happens that our society can be described as a careless society, so society without care in between people and between people and the environment, we discovered, or we have helped by some philosophers to discover, the care is tactile. So you cannot have care if you don't have a contact in between the bodies. The human bodies and the bodies of the other entities around us. So there was this very important issue. We could not imagine a society that would be sustainable if not we are capable to reconnect people, to create more closeness in between people and the environment. And here, as you understand, emerged the issue about proximity. So the idea was to have a society of care, we need to have a society of proximity, and to design for care means, at the end of the day, to design for proximity. And looking better what was happening and why our society are so unsustainable, we can describe it as a kind of process, the result of a process that started from a society. The pre-modern society was society of people that was necessarily close one to the other one, because this was the only way to communicate, to society that we can say society and cities in the society of distance. We could say that in some way modernity can be described as a process in which we used all our scientific and technological knowledge and our organizational knowledge to permit people to do things without being close, in distance. And now we are starting to recognize the catastrophe that this is generating, both for the environmental, by the environmental point of view, because distance means mobility and mobility means pollution, but also and mainly by the social and relational point of view, because this distance is generating society of loneliness. At the same time, we can see that this scenario of the society of the distance has been the dominating one in the 20th century, and is still very strong. It is still in some way supported by many forces. But at the same time, we have another scenario that is emerging that is even more tragic by my point of view, that we can call it the scenario where you can do everything without moving from where you are, at home, for instance, or with a more, maybe more catching expression, the scenario of life as a video game. That means a kind of separation from what we want to do and where we want to do. We are doing something more and more in the digital space, and our body and our physical experience of our environment. So we know that we are living in a hybrid environment, in a hybrid space. So that means that we are living both in the physical and in the digital space, and this is not new. But for sure, there has been in the last period, especially with the COVID and after the COVID, an acceleration in our movement from the physical to the digital space. Well, this can be discussable, but in my view, and in the view of many people as me, this is really a dystopic perspective. And this is a dystopic perspective not only because to maintain this digital environment is very costly in energetic term. So even if we do not physically move, we are consuming a lot of energy and therefore producing a lot of pollution. But also, and particularly because it's a terrible society, the society in which physically people are closed in their own boxes, with the body in the box, and afterward opening a digital space and imagining to live in this second life, or multiverso as it's called today. So this is a very disruptive perspective, and it's a terrible perspective. So it's disruptive and terrible in my view, and by many point of view, the environmental one, the social one, because you don't have any society anymore. And also, I will say, in the political one, because we know that living in this virtual reality, there is a lot of the tendencies to close yourself in kind of what is called a communication bubble. And we know what does it mean when people live too much in this communication bubble, how this became an opportunity to create contrast and to separate one from the other one. So now I don't have the time to go too much in depth on this, but I'm only saying that we are facing very worrying scenarios with strong powers that are pushing in this direction. And what we should do on the opposite is going back to the beginning of my story to see the importance of proximity. So the importance of proximity means to recognize the importance in our life, in the life of our planet, or what we can call as topography or topology. So the description to take in account where our bodies, our physical bodies are, what kind of relationship we can have, how can we do things together, being close, how we can be closed also in relational terms. And this is the scenario of proximity, as I said. So imagining a kind of competition in between different scenarios, and this is the political side of what we have to do. So there are different scenarios in competition, and we have to try to promote the one that we think is the best one. And of course, for me now, I'm proposing this scenario of proximity as a competing scenario. And it is a scenario, to conclude, and not only a utopia or not only a vision, because there are some possibility to make it real. So a scenario for me is a vision plus some leverage, some power in the reality that say that it could be transformed in reality. So for me, it is it's not the mainstream, of course, unfortunately, but there are some possibility. And which are the possibilities? For me, the main possibility comes from what in the past 20 years we have seen in the society as changes, people doing things in different way, and normally calling it social innovation. That should be called more precisely bottom-up, transformative social innovation. And we have discussed, and this has been also my interest in the past 2 decades, about the meaning and the quality and how to support this group of people doing things in a collaborative way, trying to find solution to the everyday life problems, collaborating, doing things together, and at the same time solving problem and creating, recreating, reweaving the social fabric. And we have discussed how this initiative could be supported, could be consolidated in time, could spread. But now I recognize also that those people are not only show a way to solve problems in a collaborative and promising way by the environmental point of view and social point of view, but also they are working in space, very specific space, and they are also in some way enriching the proximity systems. So I think that the point in which we are is the possibility to give a kind of framework to all these different, very diverse social innovation, naming it as a component of this new scenario of care and proximity. And the second point is that after some years of this bottom-up transformative social innovation that we can see as a kind of constellation of new way of doing things, we have some institutions that are trying to, in some way, learn from these experiences and give a frame and find some norms that help them. Of course, again, this is not the mainstream and is not totally developed, but we can have, for instance, in many cities in the world, this idea that normally is called the society, the city of the 15 minutes, I prefer to call it the city of proximity, but more or less is the same story. They try to give an idea of the overall city that could be done in the way that we can, in some way, observe in these social innovations. And we could use as an example, for instance, Barcelona with the Superia project, or we can look at Copenhagen, of course, since a long time. But we have a lot of discussion in the journal about Paris, that the mayor had his election using the expression the 15-minute city as the main claim of what she wanted to do. So I name and I quote this example only to say that nowadays we are not only as a driver of a possible scenario of proximity, not only the constellation of a small local bottom-up initiative, but we have also some institutions that are trying to give a frame and to support this kind of idea. And finally, and I conclude, also design has learned a lot, working on with and in the social innovation, working now also frequently with the cities that are moving in this direction. We start to have ideas on how we can support this initiative. What does it mean to design for care, design for proximity? And in my book, I try to explain a little bit this story and the examples, and I hope that it will be of some help in promoting this scenario. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ezio. We will come back to you in a while because we have a lot of questions, of course. Our next guest is Pia Mäkelinen. She's head of public sector and authority collaboration at the Swedish Industrial Design Foundation, Svid. There she has managed the first Swedish policy lab, Förnyelselabbet, which gathers actors and inhabitants to visualize challenges and find ways forward through design methodology. How does Svid help sustain sustainable social innovation?
It's in our core mission. So what we're trying to do is to both share design as a tool for sustainable transformation, but also develop design methodology, because this is a field, and just what Ezio was saying, we need to build new muscles, we need to build new structures, and this is where our design foundation wants to be one vessel for this to happen. And we have in our we have tools such as education courses. We form networks of different kinds. We have different guides for circularity. And we have our own explorative lab space, which is called Förnyelselabbet, and was commissioned by the Ministry of Social Affairs in 2016. So it's been a very interesting journey in moving the sort of what can design do within a field of public sector and agency collaboration. How can we aid and help and really release the potential? And I think, providing what Ezio was saying, I think we're in a situation where we need to make the civil servant more human. We need to provide them spaces to reflect and to reconnect with the purpose for why they actually once moved into the public sector. And I think the labs that we have done in many different, we started off in a very central, so starting with the first Swedish policy lab being at Salar, the Swedish Association for Local Municipalities and Regions, alongside with the Ministry of Social Affairs, but found out the hard way, or by working on this, that how do we actually push for social transformation? Well, we believe that it needs to be in combination with this local. It needs to be where the people are and where we can connect in sort of an explorative space also outside of our foundation.
And
then combining it to the national agencies and to the national policy level. That's what we have been aiming to do.
And now you have, you told me that you have changed the perspective a little bit, or the way you work, because this is the challenge. Sometimes we talk about that at the forum, that scaling up, upscaling, and also moving different initiatives from one region to another, or from national to regional level, vice versa. What do you think of this, and how do you?
I think it is just reflecting back to how I would have answered that in 2016. I would have thought of scaling sort of the innovation that came out of this, the app, and we're now looking into a different scenario where we actually see more that we help producing the capability to be in uncertainty and being in complexity. So that's one thing. And I think what we're aiming to do is to scale the learning and to scale the scaffolding or the structure to have these spaces and have the spaces connected to learn properly. So that's one. And also moving from the first Swedish policy lab to thinking about policies being, we need the policies, but we also need to be aware of the cultures that these policies meet. And we can only understand how that affects people by being in connection and being in dialogue. And that's what we're trying to provide. So having both of those, having the policy, the governance, but also the cultural bit. And design is fantastic that way, because we can't, if we don't have words for it, we might need to craft the way we perceive things and get the words, and actually being able to be more active in changing and transforming and pushing for the system change that we need.
I know that you and Svensk Form just conducted a study on design as a development power for society's sustainable development. What did the study show?
I have to sort of show it. We're very proud. This is easy to download from the homepage, svid.se or svenskforum.se. And we're partners with Svensk Forum, and the commission from the Ministry of Culture, they needed a report saying, so what is design doing? How can design be used? How is it being used in other Nordic countries? And how, so sort of a tool for them to take better decisions. And I think what it actually does is to show many different cases of how design is being used. It's also saying something about there is maybe a disconnect from the students coming out of our academic institutions and the kind of work that they get to do. We could use their power and their methods and their mindsets, I think, even more strategically. And it also gives us an insight into the differences we have in the Nordic regions, where we have our sister design organizations, Doga in Norway, owned by 4 ministries, having another sort of mandate in their back. Danish Design Center, who's fantastic in working with the desirable circular society, and also providing help to the EU Commission. So design is really playing a very instrumental part. And as a design foundation, I think that's one thing that we also need to look at. Trying to form ourselves together with Svensk Forum, but also to have to make sure that this is being commissioned in a different way and maybe co-owned in another way, to make sure that we get the best out of what design can do on a strategic level.
You say that we can learn from the other Nordic countries, but it sounds like that it's also the ecosystem, the structure, the infrastructure that's very much different.
I think having a mandate from the ministries, I think that provides you you can have a holistic coordinating mandate then. And I think we do this anyway at our design foundation, but not having the mandate makes it a bit more difficult. Long-term funding, the fragmentation that we see in the Swedish innovation system with loads of lovely projects, but maybe not the sort of how do we curate those. So the social innovation that Ezio was talking about, coming from the bottom up, how do we provide the best and the most valuable things that come out of those a really long-lasting future? I think that's really important.
Thank you, Pia, and welcome. I now will move over to Sara Bjärstorp. Sara Bjärstorp is Director of Forum for Social Innovation Sweden at Malmö University. And as I said before, we're a national knowledge hub and a collaboration platform for social innovation. Sara is also responsible for developing the university's external relations with the cultural sector. How does Forum for Social Innovation Sweden work with design, social innovation and sustainability?
Well, I think one very obvious way is what we're doing here today. A very important job for us is to disseminate knowledge on social innovation and to also find new arenas for that. And I think it's really great that we can do this at the Southern Sweden Design Days. To perhaps also frame the conversation on social innovation a little bit differently. And I think Ezio's introduction was perfect for that. But the forum was founded in 2010 at Malmö University, and the design perspective has been very influential for us, since at the university there's a very strong tradition of participatory design and design research. So that's been an important context for us as well. So we have worked more hands-on in design processes, where the forum has facilitated a few years ago, for example, and Per Anders was very much involved in that process, facilitated quite a big series of collabs dealing with everything from policy development and understanding the ecosystem to urban development, working with libraries and so on, where researchers could work together with stakeholders, but also importantly with decision makers and people with different kinds of mandates, a lot in the public sector, in these labs. So that was a very hands-on work that was done, and I think that would be very interesting. We talked a little bit about that before. How can we take that to the next level, also considering the important work that you've just recently completed, so that we don't always have to invent new formats for this, because we have tried quite a lot and we can use that again, I think.
Well, we collaborate with many different actors, and what actors do we collaborate with?
I mean, that's the hallmark of everything we do, is that we want to make everything into cross-sectoral collaboration, so civil society and the public sector, academia, but also the private sector. And that's, I think, very important for where the social innovation ecosystem is today, that we really need to create these horizontal platforms for collaboration between the sectors. I think that's really really important. And another aspect that maybe we have time to discuss is also then the vertical connection that Ezio was talking about. I thought that was very interesting, on how, if you get the bottom-up transformative social innovation, how can the institutions, or maybe even the system, learn from that? And I think we see some really interesting initiatives right now on the systems level. Tomorrow we will host a conversation on the new European Bauhaus, which I think is a very good example of, on paper, quite a top-down initiative, but actually building on quite a strong grassroots ethos. And I guess the jury's out on whether that's going to work, but there's definitely that kind of vertical development that Ezio was talking about as well. Because we talk a lot about the ecosystem for social innovation and working on the systems level. But an ecosystem also presupposes proximity. So it's not just a system, it's also the relations between all the actors in the ecosystem. And they need to be close to each other and maybe even share some roots and have exchange. So working with that concept of the ecosystem, I think, is also a good way to maybe take the perspective on design and social innovation a bit further.
Do you agree with Pia, what they have seen in Svid?
Definitely. We're in a European project right now funded by the European Commission, where we have made an analysis of the Swedish ecosystem for social innovation, and we see exactly the same things. The need for a coordinated policy. We did have a policy for social innovation in Sweden, which lasted for 3 years. And then you think, so where are we now? In connection to what you were talking about with the ministry's mandates and so on. Long-term funding, and that kind of scaffolding and scaling as well. So there are very many similarities, definitely.
We have to move on.
Yes.
Thank you, Sara. Last but not least, Per-Anders Hillgren, welcome.
Thank you.
Per-Anders, you are a professor in interaction design at the School of Arts and Communications at Malmö University, and have been active in the research field of participatory design for a number of years. At present, you coordinate the research platform Collaborative Future Making at Malmö University. You know Ezio quite well. Well, you collaborated. In the process.
He has been a big inspiration for us in Malmö since many years back, and Ezio has been in Malmö several times. I've been in Milano, and quite interesting. I mean, we were really inspired also by this kind of supporting grassroots organizations and initiatives. But then I maybe have been working more and more with the other side of supporting civil servants or the public sector so they can support grassroots instead.
And you say that both sides are needed.
And it's really tough. I mean, if you're a project manager, to delegate power, to delegate resources to others is of course tough, and you need to have support in that. So it's really demanding.
But do you say, how is the climate now, do you say, for giving up power and for the interest of social innovation within the public sector?
I would say it's in many ways good, but it's still, maybe I expected that more should have happened the last 10 years than it actually have happened. And a lot of people that engage in this, they have to work, you know, I mean, in a bureaucracy where everything is organized, you save some time. It's maybe from some aspects very efficient, but it's difficult to produce the value we're talking about here. So if you really want to do that, that will cause more work, more energy. So it's really have been tough, a tough journey for a lot of these people, I would say.
You talk about that we have shadow places. How can we eliminate these or make them visible?
No, I really like the idea of a city of proximities and especially how we can nurture relationality much more. And a lot of researchers talk about that we are actually living in a kind of crisis of relationality, because we have no idea of how we are embedded in larger ecological and social ecosystems. And I think cities of proximity would be a really good place to nurture that kind of learning, how we can connect in different ways. But then we are also dependent on other places on Earth, minerals for our computers or batteries and so on. And Fowl Plumwood, she talks about shadow places that it's often more easy to build a belonging to the local community, and that's good. But we also need to complement that with an understanding of these shadow places that might be very far away, which is harder work, I would say.
You participated in the EU Policy Lab and project The Future of Government 2030 Plus, and created the Parliament of Nature, I don't know, Naturens Parlament. What did you do?
Yeah, I mean, we were invited to come up with this kind of speculative design fictions of how could governance work in the future. And working with Anne Light, a colleague at Malmö University, we worked with counterfactual world making and produce very, very different worlds. That was a starting base to think differently how we organize ourselves. And one example was this Parliament of Nature, where actually all kinds of living entities on the world got a vote in a parliament. How could you actually do that? How could you represent the more than human? It's of course very difficult, but it could probably be done. And I mean, also today we have in South America, several countries have written in nature rights in their constitution. In New Zealand, they have a river called Wanganui River that also got the status of of a person. So we can rethink this a lot. Another kind of scenario we developed that is aligned with cities of proximities was that kind of very local democracy where people were really in a radical way delegate resources and mandate for citizens to work together with experts on issues they are bothered by and try to find out how could we deal with this, how can we solve these things, or what are the problems. So I think that the whole idea of cities of proximity is also really good for nurturing kind of a more democratic city as well, because when you engage in these processes, that is a way to nurture democracy.
And now you are doing you have a new research project going on together with researcher Kristina Lindström, Grief and Hope in Transition. Just briefly, what does that entail? What is that?
I mean, we are all facing now a huge transition of society, both because of climate change and the change that will cause us, but also because we need to change our way of living, reduce carbon oxide. And for example, in Sweden, we're supposed to be carbon-free in 2045, and they have launched extremely impressive roadmaps for this. But they are mainly towards industry, and they are really impressive. They will electrify the mining industry and so on. But we think you almost get the sense that this is a question for industry, and we can live our lives as normal. I don't think that's the case. I think all of us have to engage in this, and this will also cause losses for us, things that we might have to give up or different conflicts. So we think this is also an emotional journey. So both grief and hope, we need to be better in understanding grief and hope in relationship to this transition.
Great. Now we will close this up with a panel discussion. I don't know if Ezio, is he here still or? Yes, you are here. Great. I'm just curious, you were talking about that livable proximity, or how can we make this mainstream?
Yes. Well, how we can make it mainstream is, yes, we are here to discuss. It's not no one single answer, but I think that I can answer picking up something that I've heard, and I thanks all the friends and colleagues for the contribution, because it has been very interesting for me to listen in some way your position, and also a little bit of feedback of my provocation on this notion of proximity. So I will start with one of the last points said by my friend Per Anders. Of course, when we talk about proximity, this today do not mean that everything has to be done nearby where you are. It's simply a change in the perspective, in the direction. So for me, for all the past period, the idea has been to separate, and afterwards something remain also close, but the idea was to separate, to create distances. Now we should adopt a kind of subsidiarity principle in which we do everything that we can do, the more near that is possible. And afterward, maybe there are something that cannot and should not be done. I always talk about the combination, the art to combine the short network and the long networks. And the long networks are important, not only for the material production, as Per Anders was saying, but also for feeding our culture. So we need also of ideas that come from very far away. So the proposition of proximity as we can do today is sometimes some people think that it's going back to the village or to the neighborhood of the past, but it's not like this, because first of all, we cannot go back to the past because the conditions are changes so much, but also because many people will not like to go back to the past, including myself. So it's a new kind of proximity, kind of a hybrid proximity in which we try to have the most as possible near when we want, but we are connected with so many other things. The second point that I like to say is when the second speaker that was where is yes, thank you. And she was saying that probably we have also to redefine what has been in some way the consolidated idea of social innovation. So I think that all of us, the people, the community of people that was talking about social innovation, we refer to something that more or less started in the Western country and after was spread at the beginning of the last century with a certain characteristic that was mainly bottom-up transformative social innovation. Now it has to change, and I mean also it must change. So on one side, as she said, we have not to reinvent the wheel. There is something that is very clear and we can use some experience, so we have to work and to use these experiences. But at the same time, we have also to make some steps. So for instance, as she was saying, and also was part of my discussion, and also of the Per Anders, there is we at least myself, but many people was concentrated mainly on how to develop horizontally that social innovation examples. But it's very important now to recognize the importance also of the vertical thing. And the vertical things means mainly the role of the institution, the role of the public. And the example that has been done are how the public can react and how the public can become an helper of the process with all the difficulties that Per Anders was saying before. But I think that there are some examples everywhere. I know better maybe in Italy, but everywhere over some new normatives that are capable in some way to help, to support, and to give opportunities for who is willing to make some kind of social innovation. But the change, only one last thing and stop. The main change is that I'm sure that we are witnessing a new wave of social innovation. So the one that, as I said, look into social innovation normally, and also in our speech today, we refer to the social innovation that we have known that started 2 decades ago. But the COVID and now the war are generating such kind of transformation that for sure something new will happen. And so we should be very attentive to be capable to recognize the signals of the new wave of social innovation in the Western countries and in the other ones.
Thank you, Ezio. I'm sorry, but we're running out of time, so we have to be really short. But just one last question: what can we do? What is the next step? What do you say, Pia?
No, but I think based on what all the brilliant things that have been said here, I think maybe moving from what Ezio, what you were mentioning, that the reactive part to being a more proactive and maybe in collaboration, having the academia with us. So moving into a stage where we engage people through design and engage citizens and the power sharing that we have been discussing. So that's something I know.
And Sara and Per Anders, from the university's perspective, what can we do?
I think we can only agree, and I think we should continue this conversation. Apparently, 45 minutes is way too short, so we should definitely find those spaces. You talked about the spaces to reflect, and can we find spaces where we actually can reflect but also act, but more space?
And I think time, and Ezio, you also talk about time in your book, because I mean the kind of society we live in today, where each year we're supposed to be a little bit more efficient, and we work so much. If we want a city of proximity, we want to nurture relationality, that will need time. So we need to rethink time in how we use our time in society.
Thank you very much. I think that will be our last word. And thanks for listening. And I hope that you will connect with us. Thank you.